Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pipeline, the webcast where we get to interview innovative and creative people and find out about their current, past, and future projects. Today, my guest is Warner Hodges. He's known for his guitar playing for Jason the Scorchers, with Dan Baird, and with his solo projects. And today, we're probably going to be talking about some of those things. Warner, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Scott.
First, I want to ask, how are you and your wife doing during this time? How are things going?
We are okay. I don't want to get into it too heavy. Everything's all right. My wife did test positive in the middle of April, but she's through it, it seems.
Wow.
The union did tests for all us traveling musicians. I had actually been in the Lombardy area of Italy in December and was extremely worried. I was sick a lot of January and, of course, gave it to my wife in February. And I thought I had already had the virus. I ended up testing negative and no antibodies. I don't think I've had it. But she come down positive, which was startling to us. She had been sick for a while and she had to deal with it. But she's on the other side of it now. She's still fighting being pretty tired. It wore her out. It was pretty rough, but she's a resilient woman, to say the least.
Wow. I'm so sorry that she had to experience that, but
Yeah. It was not fun.
So you mentioned you were touring. When did you have to stop touring because of all?
Well, we managed to. We did the final Dan Baird and Homemade Sin tour. Dan had decided last year was it. He's had two different battles with cancer the last 2 years that he's won, but he was just tired of trying to tour and just wanted to stay home. Was tired, so he retired. We finished that tour in mid-December last year, and then I had a final thing on the books. I did the Outlaw Country Cruise 5 as a solo artist in late January, and we got home off that. I was supposed to do a Warner E. Hodges band solo tour May and June, and it all went south as everybody's work did. In March. And I guess we were pretty fortunate. The Outlaw Country Cruise boat, I know there's been 3 or 4 people that come down with coronavirus off of it. And in the middle of that cruise, we went from buffet style eating to they had to bring everything to you. You weren't allowed to touch nothing. And
wow.
We didn't realize that. I was talking to some of the Mavericks guys, and we almost got quarantined. We lucked up and got off that boat. About 2 or 3 days later is when they started quarantining cruise lines. So thank the good Lord we didn't get stuck on that boat for weeks.
Yeah, that could have been really bad. Really bad.
Well, there for a while, I know, it was just like, wow, what are they going to do? There was a bunch of cruise lines out there that they couldn't come in, they couldn't dock,
Right.
And we're very fortunate that didn't happen to us. I know Larry Campbell ended up coming down with coronavirus. He was on that boat. There was a few different people that come down sick. Like I say, my wife has since had it. So I don't know. Right now, I tentatively have dates in October and November. Hope they happen, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Well, I hope the best for that, and hope
for everybody.
Yeah, really. Speaking of touring, I know you were the child of people who were in the military, so you moved around a lot. You've toured a lot with many different groups. What do you? Are you somebody who likes life on the road, or is that something that's just it's just part of the business?
No, I love it. It was where Dan and I really did differ. Dan 3 or 4 weeks, and he wanted to be home. Outside of seeing my family, I could live on the road. It's what I've always done. I mean, of course I miss home, and I want to see my wife, and want to see the kids, and now grandkids. but it's what I do. I'm all about let's move it on up the road to tomorrow.
Yeah. And do you are there certain do you have any challenges on the road? I know some people, their diet can be a challenge, or like you said, missing certain people or certain activities. Are there any challenges that you have, or is it pretty much routine for you?
I fall into I try to make it a serious routine. Every hotel room I go in, I put things in the exact same place to the best of
Really?
my ability. And I miss seeing my wife. I miss my wife most of all. But I have no complaints, man. I get to go play guitar for people and make a living. That's a pretty good life.
Yeah, that is, and then you play it very well. So that's
Well, thank you very much.
nice. So as we chatted early, and as you might know, Pipeline, we're what I like to do is find out about projects that are endearing to the guests, and people who are in fine arts or culinary arts, things like that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so my first question to you is, what's a project you've worked on in the past 5 or 10 years that's been very meaningful to you, or was particularly challenging, or holds a certain is dear to your heart, something that you've done?
Probably the very first Dan Baird and Homemade Sin record. Dan and I had just reconnected like in 2006, 2007. I always loved the Georgia Satellites and his work with those guys. Dan's 2 solo records, Love Songs for the Hearing Impaired, is one of my 3 favorite rock records of all time. If I only get 3 records, that's going to be one of the ones I carry with me. And I always wanted to work with Dan and Morrow. Morrow Magellan was his drummer. And at that point, Keith Christopher played bass in the band, who Keith's now the bassist in Skinnerd.
Mm-hmm.
But Keith originally, the Georgia Satellites were Keith and the Satellites. It was Keith's band way back yonder. So I was very fortunate when I got asked to do some dates with them. Just classic Dan Baird. They were going to do 12 shows, and that was it. He was done with the music business. And classic Dan Baird. So I did the 12 shows, and it went from we're going to do these 12 shows and that's it to we're going to do these 12 shows and then we're going to go to Nashville and record a record, which I was ecstatic about. But first time in the studio with those guys was a big deal. Dan's one of my heroes. I've learned a lot from Dan, and getting to play with, to me, Morrow Magellan's on my Mount Rushmore of rock drummers. I always described it, there's a freight train coming tonight. You can either get on or get run over by it, but there's a freight train coming tonight. Yeah, that's Morrow Magellan. And Keith Christopher, I don't know that I've ever played with a better bassist. He's, Jaco Pastorius good. That's pretty frightening.
Wow. Yeah.
There was many a night where I went on stage knowing that second place was going to be the best I could do that night.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty cool thing. It was a ferocious band, very ferocious band. And I was glad that, I had been told up front, if I couldn't keep up, I would be replaced.
Wow.
And, that was not being mean or anything. It was just like, we will get a guitar player in here that can handle it. Hopefully you're that guy. And I stuck around for 12, 13 years. So I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, nice. Now, did you first, was that initial meeting from the Scorchers opening for them or playing with them?
No, the Satellites opened for us.
Okay.
And Jason and the Scorchers. Jason is the guy that took the cassette tape that had Hands to Yourself to our managers at the time, Jack Emerson and Andy McLennan. guy that was kind of helping out the Georgia Satellites at that time, a guy named Kevin Jennings, who's also responsible for bringing to our attention another Atlanta band called the Black Crows. Kevin was our drum tech in the Scorchers and my roommate on the road. And he kept playing this band's cassette. And Jason heard Hands and was like, wow, Jack and Andy have to hear this. And one thing led to another. The Satellites ended up being managed by Jack Emerson and Andy McLennan. And later on, the rest is history, Yeah. But they went out, that first tour, they went out opening for us. And in 90 days, we watched the rocket take off, and they left us and joined Bob Seger in Kansas City playing Arrowhead Stadium.
Wow.
Dan always joked about it. In 90 days, they went from playing to 10 people in Atlanta to playing to 75,000 people at Arrowhead Stadium. So.
That's a leap.
Oh, yeah. They were a great band.
Wow. So that is so awesome to hear that story and how you connected with Dan and your relationship.
I met Dan and Rick Richards, the lead guitar player in the Georgia Satellites, the other guitar player in the Georgia Satellites. Dan's a badass lead player too. I met them in like '84, I think, down in Athens, Georgia, at one of the versions of the 40 Watt Club. And at that particular time, I think the Satellites ended up having 7 or 8 drummers and 7 or 8 bass players before the group that we all know.
Right.
And I didn't realize that I'd known Keith Christopher and Mauro Magellan had played in an Atlanta band called The Brains. I'd seen them in Nashville a few times. I just didn't personally know them. Keith and I become friends in the 80s because he ended up living in Nashville a lot. But I met Rick and Dan when they didn't even have a bass player and drummer. They were in between, still trying to find guys. I guess it was like '84. So I've known Danny a long time.
Yeah.
And Ricky.
And you're in Nashville now?
Oh yeah. I was in Nashville. I moved to New York for 5 years. I lived in LA for a couple of years, but I'm a Nashville guy. I'm a hick. I'm back here. I've been here since '92. Been back since '92.
Okay. Yeah, I talked with Jason a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned that you're both in the area there.
Oh yeah. Jason Ringenberg, you're talking.
Right.
Yeah, Jason lives about 25, 30 miles out on the west side of town in Dixon.
Okay.
He got him a little farm out there, which is great. It's perfect,
Yeah. I'm
a little bit more in town. Downtown. Downtown's only a couple minutes away from me. So
nice.
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite thing about Nashville?
It's starting to go away a little bit, but what I always loved about Nashville was it was a big town that wished it was a city.
Uh-huh.
But it was really a big town that wished it was a city. Now it is a city. But you can still get out to the country pretty quick here. 15, 20 minutes, you can be out in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of like that, Like I say, downtown, seriously, Deb and I could go go out, get in the car, and in 5-6 minutes, we could be downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I lived in Knoxville for a couple of years and would travel back. Excuse me?
Where are you now?
Oh, I'm in Houston.
Yeah. My little brother lived in Houston for years.
Yeah. Houston's pretty big.
Yeah, that's a big town. Big city.
I used to go back and forth between Knoxville and Carbondale, Illinois.
Jason went to school in Carbondale.
Yeah. We both went to SIU, and
oh, cool.
But yeah, I'd pass through Nashville, and I only had one visit there in that time, and I really liked it. And I want to get back to Nashville, not only for the music scene, but I was adopted as a child, and I've found my biological family, and I have a brother in Nashville.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So cool, I want to get back up there and meet him, and we've talked, corresponded. And so yeah, Nashville holds a very, very close place to my heart for a variety of reasons. So
It's an amazing place. A little side story. Before the coronavirus thing, Nashville, Tennessee, the volunteer state, that always makes me cringe. I'm not a UT guy. I'm an Alabama guy. Roll Tide. But the volunteer state, we got hit by all these tornadoes before the coronavirus thing happened. I mean, Nashville slowly somehow we're now in Tornado Alley. And Nashville got tore up really bad. And my youngest daughter, Amelia, and I went over. I own a small construction company. Deb and I do, and all of my kids know how to build. And we went over and helped in North Nashville. They had gotten really tore up bad. And it was pretty amazing. The first day, the call kind of went out. They needed some help. East Nashville got a bunch of help, but North Nashville did not. And the call kind of went out. They needed some help over there. And I mean, the second day we were over there, it was unbelievable. The road crews, there was so many people that showed up to help. They had to ask people to park away because the road crews couldn't get the electric service trucks in. It was really an amazingly wonderful thing about Nashville, Tennessee.
wow,
How many people showed up to help because people needed help.
yeah,
And it made me very proud to live in this town.
that's great to hear. That's great.
Proud of my daughter. She knew where to go.
Right.
I had a few skills that, we had a few skills we could actually help out and knew what we were doing.
Yeah,
That was
I
cool.
mean, yeah, that's cool that your daughter can swing a hammer and
All
done.
of my kids can. They're pretty incredible.
Nice, nice. So my second question is, what is the current project you're working on that you would like to talk about, that you're excited about?
Well, I guess my new record, the Warner E. Hodges Band new record, it just feels right. I mean, it's done, but I literally got it done. It was to be released in early May, late April, early May. We got it done literally. Joe Blanton mixed the record. I couldn't go over to his house anymore. It was that, it's that new. So, it's a really great record. We would be in Europe touring it right now. That's, I guess, what I want to talk about,
Yeah. So where did you record that?
We recorded the drum tracks and a lot of the bass tracks in London last May. I used my band that I use over in Europe, the Warner E. Hodges Band, which they're all really great guys. My drummer's name's John Powney. Bassist is Jason Knight, and my guitar player's a guy named Ben Marsden. And we recorded bass and drums in Atlanta. I mean, in Atlanta. Good Lord, in London in May. And then I stayed touring with Dan the whole year. I wasn't able to get back to that till January of this year. And we did the guitars remotely. Ben was sending us guitar tracks from where he lives in Great Britain. And I recorded at Joe's studio at the Underground Treehouse, Joe Blanton's place. We did all the guitars there. Dan was involved a little bit, as he always is. If he's around and he's in the room, your record's going to be better. And we had Dan play bass on a few songs, a couple of 3, 4. And he played electric guitar on 1 or 2. And Dan and I did all the acoustic guitars together. And then I did the vocals, and Joe did all the background vocals because he had to.
So you were recording guitar remotely. What kind of software were you using for that?
I do not know what Ben used. Ben would record tracks and send them to Joe. And we would go, we like this, we don't like that. Can you do this? Can you do that? He'd record it again and send it back to us.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer, so I don't really know. I don't really know the software that he used.
Yeah. And same with the vocals?
No. All of my lead vocals, I did it at the studio, and Joe did all the background vocals. We were gonna have the guys sing at their place, but Joe wanted better control, and Joe's an amazing singer. And at that point, everything was in lockdown anyway, so Joe just said, "Hell with it, I'll do all the vocals."
Yeah.
The background vocals.
And speaking of control, so during the mixing process, you weren't there. Is that uncomfortable to not be behind the board?
You know what? It would be had I not. Joe is also. I don't know if you know Dan and Joe and I, along with Brad Pemberton, Steve Earle's drummer, have another band called the Bluefields, which Joe sings lead in. And we've done 5 Bluefields records. Joe's been involved in my last 3 solo records. He's been involved in the last 3 or 4 Homemade Sin records. So, and Joe and I go back to the 70s. I've known Joe since pre-Jason and the Scorchers. I played drums in Joe's punk rock band. Joe introduced me to the Ramones. I'd never heard of them, That's how far back we go. So it was a unique situation, but I had no problem with Joe doing it. I didn't have to be there. And the few things I didn't like, or he sent me stuff when he wasn't sure, and it was like, go that way. But, Joe didn't really need my help. He's really, really good.
Good. Because I know that whenever I've recorded, I really have to trust the producer and I would like to be there behind there, over their shoulder, just listening. So I have been for every other record.
Yeah. We usually, Joe, Dan, and I usually work as a team, and we have what we call fresh ear guy. 2 guys will be at the studio all day. One dude comes in and out where he's got fresh ears.
Yeah.
And that guy, sometimes, you can't see the forest for the trees. You get into working on a hi-hat so long, you don't realize that you don't have any snare drum in the mix,
Right. Right.
So fresh ear guy, we found that that's really worked for us through the years. Dan or I would be fresh ear guy, and 2 guys would be there all day long.
Yeah.
But it's this one it couldn't be done that way. Joe's wife was working at home. His son was at home. The school was closed up, and it just wasn't a doable thing this time.
Yeah.
And if I had to come down to trusting somebody, it would have been Joe or Dan anyway. So
Mm-hmm. And your song, do you have
my wife Deb? That would have been the 4th one.
Do you have a songwriting process, or is every song a different type of experience? Or do you sit in your living room and plunk around on the guitar till you got a melody and then you add words, or is it a completely different process?
Yeah, for me, being a guitar player, it always starts with the guitar. Dan has worked on me forever, quit writing riffs and then trying to be. I'm very fortunate. I get to work with Joe, who's an amazing lyricist. Dan, who, my Lord, I don't know anybody that's got the hits that Dan's got that I can actually say I played with. Jason Ringenberg, I've wrote Ginger Wildheart, Tommy Womack. I've been around some guys that are serious lyricists. I don't consider myself a big lyricist. I'm a guitar guy. I will come up with some hooky stuff, and every blue moon I snag a decent tune. Most of the time I'll go to Joe with a, hey man, what do you think about this? And here's my melody, and I've got a line, and within an hour we'll have a song. It's everything starts with the guitar for me.
Now, do you when you're at home doing that, do you just make a little demo on your phone, or
literally that? Dan and Joe are both, quite honestly, before the coronavirus thing happened, Dan has just upgraded his computer system at home. He's got a little studio in his basement, And Dan's given me his old rig, so I was going to set it up in my basement. And the coronavirus thing has really messed that up. Dan's house is totally off limits right now. I mean, with him, he's had cancer twice, and his wife's not very well either. So just none of us are going to Dan's house right now. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just pull out the phone or do it on my iPad, and somewhere where I don't lose an idea.
Has technology in the last 20 years changed the way you write songs?
Not for me, really, because I it's not like I'm big engineer guy to begin with. I guess the technology has changed in that I got enough sense. I'll get my idea to the phone or the iPad, and then I'll go to Joe or Dan. And at that point, I now have drum machine and the capability of throwing your idea down where here's 2 guitars, bass, drums, and a semi vocal. I don't like demos to be too much more than that. I don't really like, if you do a demo that's too great, you get married to the damn demo. It's almost rough mixes.
Yeah.
I always like rough mixes better than the real mix. There's a rawness to them. They might not be as good, but there's a rawness and an immediacy to them that isn't there when you slick it up.
Yeah. And what are you what's your go-to guitar lately?
Well, I
guess I should say the whole rig. What's your go-to rig now?
Well, I mean, live, for the last few years, I've become a Vox guy, an AC30 guy. My very first amp was a Vox Berkeley 2 Beetle amp that my parents bought that and a 62 Jazzmaster off a guitar player that played with them in 1969. Threw it in the closet, paid $125 for the 2 of them. Threw it in the closet, and when I started playing around with guitar, my dad went, "Here's yours," So I kind of ended up back at Vox, and I really dig AC30s, and I've got a hand-wired one in Europe, and I've got one here, and I've kind of become Les Paul guy. I was in the Scorchers, I'm Telly guy, but in Dan's band, Dan's Telly guy. So I had to learn a new language, and I had to learn how to play a Gibson. And I've gotten very comfortable on my Les Paul. So that's probably me, my Les Paul with an AC30.
So do you have a preference between the Telly and the Les Paul?
No, you know what? I think of it as different flavors. I do have to say, in Jason and the Scorchers, which I've been, next year will be 40 years, I need a Telly in my hand. That's what I'm used to. But in Dan's band, I really do need a Les Paul in my hand. And in my band, I've kind of gotten used. I've got a couple of really good Les Pauls. Been very fortunate that Gibson's been real good to me.
Oh.
And I both of them are custom shop things that guys that were fans built for me. And they're great guitars,
Mm-hmm.
Cody Higbee built my last one. His brother Tony is Higbee's a real good friend of mine, and Tony plays with Tom Kiefer from Cinderella. And Tony got me hooked up with his brother, and I was complaining about one of my Les Pauls that I wasn't very happy with, that I'd spent a lot of money on. And Cody, his brother, said, "Well, tell me what you want, and I'll make that." And he did. And it's a really, really, really nice guitar. So that one goes almost everywhere with me now.
And do you are you a guitarist who use as much effects pedals, or do you keep it pretty minimal?
There's a lot of stuff on my board, but they're all one-trick ponies.
Uh-huh.
I've got 10, 12 things on my board, but like when we were recording recently, I pulled like 4 things off immediately because they're just like single song effects from Dan Baird and Homemade Sin. They were on my board when we were on the tour. Pulled them off because I wasn't going to be using them. I've got a few different boost pedals that I go back and forth between. There's there's probably still 8, 9 things on my board. But once again, like I say, most of the time there's never more than 1 or 2 things on at a time.
Mm-hmm. And did you have, was there a particular guitarist that influenced you?
Ooh, wow, that one gets really deep. And which kind of music? When I was, I'm a Jimmy Page guy. I'm a Zeppelin guy. Jimmy played on so many records, and there's so much great stuff out there of his, in the rock world. But I mean, Danny Gatton, man, I looked up and saw Danny Gatton 3 times live. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with any deeper pockets. I'm an Albert Lee guy, my God, it's Angus and Malcolm Young, Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood. Hell, Dan Baird, it's I've learned so much from Danny,
Now you mentioned your parents.
My mom and dad. Yeah.
Did they introduce you to rock and roll early on?
Mostly country stuff and their rock and roll. I mean, Little Richard, dude. My mother. I remember my mother singing Little Richard songs to me when I was so small. Little bitty kid. Their rock and roll, Chuck Berry, old Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard to me is a penultimate. I always loved everything. I mean, it's what Dan used to say. It's like listening to a tenor sax as a voice. His voice was just amazing, so expressive. And then my older brother turned me on to, I lucked up. I got the first Zeppelin record, the first Black Sabbath record, and Are You Experienced for Christmas one year from my older brother. And it was like, oh my God, you can do that? Didn't know that was available. So it's Hendrix, my God, Jeff Beck, it's just, the list goes on and on.
How old were you when you started playing guitar?
I started playing drums when I was 6 or 7. I was playing drums in my parents' country band when I was 10. I started messing with guitar probably 11, 12. But I didn't really start playing. I started playing guitar out when I got the Nevermind the Bollocks record by the Sex Pistols. I sold myself as a drummer. I was still learning to play guitar. And when I heard Bollocks, I went, okay, I'm ready. I can do this, Steve Jones, I left that out. Steve, that record, that was a very influential record for people of my age.
Yeah, definitely. I'm still blown away by the production on that.
Oh, there we go.
It's still blown away.
Oh, yeah, my Lord.
That. I mean,
and the record still sounds great,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I was very fortunate. Jonesy and I become buddies, so it was a good thing. I'm a big fan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, my the third question I have is, looking what's coming down the pipeline for you. Is there a project coming up that you're excited about, that once we get through this lockdown, that you're chomping at the bit to get to?
Well, of course, getting back to touring, I hope that happens. I don't know if and when it will, but hopefully October, November will happen. And like I said, next year's 40 years for Jason and the Scorchers. So maybe,
that would be
you
awesome.
Never know. We haven't done anything for real since Halcyon Times was the last record, which was like 2012, something like that, 11, 12, 13. I don't know exactly what year it come out, but maybe, you don't know. Jason and I have talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, that would be awesome. When I was interviewing Jason, I mentioned that, the first time I saw you guys was in Carbondale. I had missed a show. You had played at a place called Gatsby's, and I missed that one. And my
Yeah.
friends were like, "Oh, you should have been there. It was so great." So I made sure next time you guys came to town that I saw you, and it was during I can't remember if it was Halloween or something, but you were playing the
We played an outdoor thing, right?
yeah, it was
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
patio of the Newman Center
Yeah.
on the north side of the patio, and you guys just blew me away. You know, your presence and Jason's presence on stage was just, for me, growing up in a little town in Illinois, not getting to see that many shows.
Sure.
Your stage presence just blew me away, and I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, sure, dude. It's the same thing. Same thing I felt when I saw AC/DC the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, oh my God, I want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, who played bass and drums in that last Jason Scorchers?
Pontus Snib is our drummer. He lives over in Sweden, and Al Collins is our bassist, whose wife Stacy Collins they have a band, the Stacy Collins Band.
Oh,
that
wow.
They work quite a bit too. Al's a pretty good bass player.
Wow. Well, I really hope you and Jason get into discussion to do a 40th anniversary tour, and I hope Houston might be on that.
Hey, I like going to Texas.
Yeah,
Texas is good.
Yeah, we have fun here in Houston, and if you like to eat, which I do.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
So many great restaurants in Houston. We love it here.
Cool, man.
Well, Warner, I want to thank you. This has been just a lot of fun talking to you, finding out your projects and what you've been working on, what you're looking forward to. Thank you so much for talking with me here on Pipeline, and I hope after this is all through, we get a chance to visit again.
Thank you, and y'all come visit me at WarnerEHodges.com.
That's it, folks. WarnerEHodges.com. Get online and check it out. Thank you, Warner.
Thank you, Scott.